I call to order this joint special meeting of the Mayor and City Council of the City of San Bernardino. Good evening, and we welcome you to tonight's workshop. We thank you for being here. As we commence, we ask that you please silence your electronic devices and refrain from creating any disruptive sounds. At this time, I will ask Councilman Ted Sanchez to lead in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilman Sanchez. We appreciate our public here tonight. Before we begin and before we go into tonight's agenda, I'd like to address the recent developments with our animal shelter. As you may have heard, the County of Riverside recently rejected a proposal to transfer our animal control services to their Animal Services Department. The proposal represented a cost savings to our city and a short-term solution for the crisis at our animal shelter. The San Bernardino Animal Shelter is in terrible shape. The building is over 50 years old and it's crumbling. It would take several millions of dollars to bring the shelter into compliance with current standards for animal shelters. This is money our city simply does not have at this time. The cost to build a new shelter is estimated at approximately $18 million. This is also money we do not have. City staff will continue operating the current shelter with our limited resources available, but we need to take bold action and find a permanent solution for our city and our animals. I'm very proud to announce that I've been speaking directly with neighboring mayors in the county of San Bernardino who have expressed an interest in forming a joint powers authority to construct a new regional animal shelter for our area. This is a long-term project and would take several years to complete. It won't happen overnight, but I have made efforts and great progress toward that endeavor. It's important that we get this process started today, and we start now. Therefore, in accordance with my authority under Section 303 of the San Bernardino City Charter, I am forming an ad hoc council committee to study the viability of forming a joint powers authority with neighboring jurisdictions to construct a regional animal shelter. I hereby appoint the following members and officers to the Animal Shelter Council Committee: Councilmember Jim Mulvihill, Chairman; Councilmember Sandra Barra, Voting Member; and Councilmember Juan Figueroa, Voting Member. The Animal Shelter Council Committee shall provide a report and recommendation to the full council no later than September 4th, 2019. At this time, we'll move into our public comment section. I invite anyone who wishes to speak and address the City Council to submit a speaker slip. I'll call on you as I receive those slips. And our first speaker will be Harry Hatch. Harry Hatch. Welcome, Mr. Hatch. Followed by Tim Doramy, followed by Robert Porter.
Good evening. It seems to me I was in this position once before when the animal shelter came up, being the first to talk. Didn't like it then, don't like it now. However, I'm not going to be speaking about that. I'd like to talk about the budget. As we sit here tonight, you have a whole bunch of decisions to make. There are a lot of things that are going on in the city that cause us pause to look and see where the money's coming from and where the money is going to. One of the things that I always look at is where the revenues were. We have $66,000 that was a fee which was paid, regulatory fee, into the city coffers. They went right into the city and over to the county because they were designated to the fire marshal's office. That's what we got for fireworks last year. That's something we never saw any size of or portion of. One of those things that you need to look at, where the money's going. Also, in our budgetary items, we have each organization within the city has been asked to cut 7 to 8%. 2018-2019 budget for the mayor's and city council's office, 61,840. It was amended in the middle of the year to 733,520. And again requested this year for 8,300, 5, and 600. That's a 14% increase from last year's budget. Now the mayor has gone ahead and cut his 7%, which means he's only getting an extra 7% on his portion. These are the things that we have to watch, the little things that are going to nickel and dime us to death. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tim Doramy, followed by Paul Sanborn.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and City of San Bernardino. Here we go again. Mayor, Riverside said no to the shelter. Now you want to sweeten the deal? When are you going to get a hint? They don't want our problem. It's our problem, not theirs. It's time to let a non-profit like RSL take over. Save the city. Don't destroy it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Paul Sanborn, followed by Robert Porter.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Congratulations, Juan, on your win. Mackenzie Beso.
Mr. Sanborn, just a second. Let's start our clock, please. City Clerk. Thank you.
I really don't need it tonight. Anyhow, Mackenzie Beso. Does anybody know who that is? You do, don't you? She's the richest woman in the world. She's half owner of Amazon. In the settlement, she gets $36 billion. She was on the news last night. She's given $18 billion away. For you animal lovers, sit down and write a letter. Go see her do what? $20 million, $25 million ain't nothing in $18 billion. You should be able to get it and get it all financed. The mayor was sworn in the 19th of December. He's now been here 5 months, 10 days. And you guys have expected miracles, I guess. I don't know what. The charter was changed. We've gone to a city form of government. One person in charge for doing this budget deal that probably nobody ever seen. That's what a friend of mine says in looking at this that was handed out a while back. He says there's about $10 million in there that he calls funny money. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, we talked about the police station before I did, about putting those tanks up there. Does anybody here like to make 35 to 50 bucks an hour pumping gas? That's what they get to go down Arrowhead. Sit there and pump that gas into the car and everything, when we could put those gas tanks up here at this station, have somebody, $15, $20 an hour guy, washing the windshield, check the oil, put the gas in, and after the little meeting and whatnot, get in that car and go and pick up one call for every man that's on duty that night. Muldahill went up Arrowhead there, trimming them palm trees, cleaning that mess up and spending thousands and thousands of dollars. I know you probably won't admit what you spend, but I tell you this much, Jim. We've got potholes in the 7th Ward, not counting the rest of the city, that money would have been better put to use. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Robert Porter, followed by Cheryl Brown, followed by Treasurer Ortiz and Ivan Garcia. Mr. Porter, welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good people. I want to say, first of all, congratulations to Juan Figueroa. It was a hard-fought race, and I'm real proud of you, dude. And I know that he'll do a great job as a councilman for the 3rd Ward. I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Valdivia. That response to the animal shelter is very positive, and I've been personally lobbying the county as well. And I've also been lobbying the county on something else, cannabis. Reason being is cannabis may end up being required in cities that voted with 60% or more, right? So even if you had a ban and in 64 you voted for 60% of your population voted to have cannabis, they may require cities and county municipalities to have one cannabis dispensary license for every 6 alcohol licenses. So why not jump the gun? Why not just do it? Why not give 166 cannabis licenses? And then if it will be across the 24 different license possibilities, so it will divide up good. And when it comes down to it at the end, if there's too many and it's not working out right, we can start getting rid of the ones that fail through natural selection. You know, actually, that happens in the cannabis industry just like everything else. Some of them that don't do good go away, right? Okay, here's the other thing. Vision, right? Have big vision. Like, I've been working on like the PR campaign for Arrowhead Peak for the last 7-8 years. And it's starting to pick up a little bit more momentum. And the more that we that people know about our great Arrowhead over there, the more chance that they'll come to visit us. So my whole goal is to get people to fly into our airport, look at our Arrowhead, study our history, go to San Manuel, maybe go up into our mountains, enjoy that, right? Maybe they'll go to the McDonald's Museum on Route 66. There is a few things that we can really show off in our city, and if we do that, we have a possibility of bringing in monies that they'll leave here and then they'll go home. So, like, we could feed our people a little better. So, have vision. I know you do, Mr. Valdivia, Mr. Nickel, Mr. Charette, Mr. Mulvihill, right? Sandra Barrow's got good vision, right? Mr. Sanchez, he's ready to run. And then Mr. Figueroa, I know he has vision. So let's do this, team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cheryl Brown, followed by Treasurer Ortiz and Ivan Garcia. Ms. Brown, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Common Council. I have a few comments to make. And the San Bernardino City Council called for a 7% cut in every department's budget, with the exception of the police department. That was by accident. They had forgotten back in November 20th, 2015, they unanimously voted to approve memorandums to the Police Management Association and the Police Officers Association that they shall have a 3.7% salary increase every year until 2020 because of Section 186 from the old city charter. I do not know why the council did that, because Section 186 in the old charter was one of the automatic cost reasons that sent the city into bankruptcy. After reviewing some of your political campaign statements and those of the Police Association, I understand why. They gave you your political campaigns, and you in return, by favor, voting to secure the employment and the salary increases, even though the city staffers, even though they didn't live here. The sad thing about this is that they don't live here. They don't spend all of their political campaign money on treasurers, consultants, printing, robocalls, or they go and do that outside of the city. In other words, you're bought and sold by money from the people who work for you. Mayor, you need to lay off the new staff you hired. You should request the police forego the 3.7% raise as guaranteed in that 2015 Memorandum of Understanding signed by the council. These two actions would go a long ways to showing good faith to the city residents that you care about them. Having said that, I'm requesting $140,000 not be taken from the libraries. If we want the city moving in the right direction to educate the workforce, to attract businesses and families, to contribute to a better life, we need to have our library. I will keep other thoughts to myself, but I really believe that we need to look at how we are cutting, who we are cutting, and why we're cutting them. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Treasurer Ortiz, followed by Ivan Garcia, followed by Majid Siraj.
Mayor and council, and soon to be Juan, I don't know where he's at, but congratulations. So tonight is a preliminary beginning of our budget process. And there are two things which we are seriously lacking in our city, which is transparency and leadership. And this is what you're tasked with in this next fiscal year. And it's not easy. We're looking at losing libraries. We're looking at reduction in employees. We have comp and class studies come next year. You have a police force that's going to come looking for a new MOU update, and we have no additional revenue. And someone just mentioned 5 months and 10 days. And in that 5 months and 10 days, we had almost $2 million, had everything been approved, $2 million in additional expenditures in our city. With new staff in the mayor's office, if PD would have got substations beyond the 7 reclassifications, and now, so why are we cutting regular services? It doesn't make any sense when we want to spend and we want to put money forth on things, it's there, and then when we don't, we cut. And it's wrong. You're looking at a possibility of 17 police officers being eliminated out of the police department with the reclassifications and if the current budget goes through. That's not increasing public safety. Nobody in management is being cut. We are way too top heavy, even at the city administration level. We can't afford, and Mayor, I think you should be paid a salary, but you're a part-time person and you're still working in a consulting business. Should you make over $120,000 when our libraries are closing at $140,000? No. Should you have a chief of staff who's a part-time employee making over $100,000 when our libraries and our services and our police officers and our code enforcement and our animal control are closing? No. Should you have hired 2 part-time employees? No. Because we have real people that need real jobs behind real services. And that's what leadership takes, is tough decisions. Because I get it, people contributed. It's nice to be able to help and pat you on the back and say thank you so much for your contribution. But you know what a good contributor does is they understand rough decision. And PD for so many years sat second to the fire department and behind their political machine of their union. And what sucks is when they stepped up for this city, we stood behind them. And now when they have the opportunity to be leaders, they're running amok with it. You know, Eric McBride was a mayor. He understands what it really takes because his ratio to lieutenants to staff was nowhere near what it was per capita to us. So all this stuff is ridiculous, and it takes research and it takes hard decisions, and that's what gets you. 4 of you are up next year. This whole dais could be overturned, and none of you have an excuse next year if this budget fails, because you're all present, one included. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ivan Garcia, Majid Siraj, and we have a couple others via email. Michaela Sepulveda, Dr. Clark, and Lorraine Wagner. Mr. Garcia, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ivan Garcia. Hi, Mr. Mayor, council and staff. Thank you for letting me speak. This is my 3rd time providing public comments, and I'm back again to talk about street alley improvement. I mean, I put a 30-page paper together. I wrote a letter to the mayor back in February of this year, and I still haven't got any resolution. We've just been brainstorming of ideas of resolutions, but there's no actions. I mean, since my involvement February of this year, I mean, I've been trying to do the legwork. I've been trying to provide my community service, help out in any way that I can. I just want to see street improvements, alley improvements. There's got to be funds out there. I go to different staff members and they tell me there's no budget, there's no money. There's got to be someone out there that's willing to donate these funds to make these repairs for our city. I mean, driving in to the building this afternoon, I literally hit like 15 potholes. It's ridiculous. I mean, you guys should be embarrassed of yourselves. You guys need to involve yourselves more in the community. I want to see action on your guys' behalf. I mean, I just hope to get a response to my letter, and I hope we can get some more street improvements, and I'm not going to go away. I'm going to continue to donate my time and help out the community as much as I can. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, On several occasions, our office has reached out to you. We've lent support to you. We've sent certain staff and personnel and resources your way. I'd love to work with you more on it. Offline, we can work on things. But my office has been responsive. We've interacted and engaged with you, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Majid Siraj. Mr. Siraj, are you here? Okay. Mikael Sepulveda, Milton Clark. Oh, there you are, Ms. Sepulveda. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Micaela Sepulveda. I am Chapo and Baby's mom. I come to ask for your help in changing some things about San Bernardino and share our story. I was born and raised here in San Bernardino and purchased a home here despite what colleagues, friends, and family warned me about my broken city. I desired to purchase a home above the 210 to ensure that my babies were going to be worry-free of fireworks because fireworks are illegal there. For almost 6 years that I've lived in my home, the fireworks have gotten out of control, and in the last 2 years, they have hit an all-time worst, to the point that Friday they sounded like explosives and caused my dogs high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression to escape for safety. The loud bangs that alternated from aerial fireworks to loud bomb-like sounds did not stop and caused my dogs to flee their home. I spent 4 hours Friday night looking for them out in the streets and then eventually fell asleep on my couch waiting for the return. I made 3 calls to 911 and dispatch reporting the fireworks, and they were sending someone. Saturday morning, my sister walked 2 miles around the neighborhood searching for them. She went to animal control to see where the whereabouts and any information around 2 p.m. And without compassion, she was told to file a lost dog sheet, read over the tips for finding their lost pet, and check back on Tuesday. With their sheet full of grammatical errors, we were able to sign up to Nextdoor, where a friendly neighbor posted about my wounded dog. I rushed to the scene and was told to go look for her at Animal Control because they took her. I called Animal Control and they told me to check back on Tuesday because they had nothing. Shortly after, I got to the office at 4 p.m., asked about my dog, and these gentlemen heartlessly told me to sign the log and go look at the dogs. Refused to let me see the dogs in isolation after I inquired about them. One said that he checked the vets in the area and nothing came up. While in tears, I asked about a deceased animals, to which they told me to check the list where there was not one there. And to come back on Tuesday. I asked for clues and they said to try Devore, but that they were closing soon. I arrived at Devore at 4:59 and was lucky that the man had a heart and suggested Grand Terrace, and luckily I was able to identify her and set for her surgery. I returned home to continue looking for Chapo around the neighborhood and post his lost missing profile on social media and Pal Boost whilst baby was in surgery. The next morning again, I went to go look for Chapo while baby was recovering from her surgery. A $1,080 emergency bill and various medications to help with pain, inflammation, and to be able to withstand the medication she has to take. Saturday night, police stated that someone had taken a picture of someone stated that somebody took a picture of a deceased dog, and I made 5 calls to 911 and 2 to dispatch that night because fireworks continued. On Sunday morning, after searching for Chapo, I got in contact with a woman to sell my dog. She helped me find a location and a time. I called dispatch until Tuesday, and they were not able to help me with this and told me to wait until Tuesday to check with the animal control. Sunday night, I called PD dispatch and was told to contact county dispatch instead about the fireworks. I was hopeful that someone was going to help me. On Monday, I called county dispatch twice again, reports fireworks, because I was too tired to call the other 4 times, knowing that the operatives were tired of hearing my same complaint, name, and number. Tuesday morning finally came, and I went to ask them about my dog's deceased body, and nobody knew its whereabouts. Animal control had it, but then they think that they didn't have it. It was already cremated, but then their follow-up system had not given the opportunity and not giving me, notifying me that he was already cremated was my closure. My time's up, but I had questions. I don't know if I can finish.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Milton Clark, followed by Lorraine Wagner. Mr. Clark, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, staff, members of the public. Thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Milton Clark. I'm president of the Library Board of Trustees. And I'm here because the libraries are a passion for me. The libraries are an asset for the city. And I'm here to speak to the council to ask them to recognize the value that the library provides to the city. The city needs many things, no question about that. Some things are probably more critical than others, and I would argue that the library is one of those things. We have residents who don't have other resources. We have young people who don't have safe spaces. The library provides resources, computer access, for example. 20 to 25% of the residents in the city of San Bernardino do not have computer access. Many of those people would come to the libraries in order to search for jobs, to look for information. All of that is provided by the library. The cuts that the library is being asked to make will mean that those resources will not be available to the residents of the city. One other thing that has come to my attention recently, departments are being asked to cut 7%. The library, in addition to the 7%, will lose an additional 4% because the police department is not going to fund $90,000 for security. We can't operate the libraries without security. We don't have the money in our budget for that. So that's another issue that I hope you will find a way to address. Anyway, I won't take the full 3 minutes, but I wanted to say that I just want to ask you to consider the value of the libraries for the city of San Bernardino when you are considering budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lorraine Wagner. Ms. Wagner, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizens. I'd like to, first of all, thank Councilman Sanchez, because in his report on TV, he did support the libraries, and he's the only one I heard that said he would definitely support the libraries. I'm Lorraine Wagner, and I'm here to readdress the concern over potentially closing the branch libraries in our fair city. It seems odd to me that you, the council, will be utilizing Feldheim Library for your meetings because it's more cost-effective, yet you cannot see beyond your own budgetary benefit to recognize the fact that the rest of the city has needs and uses the libraries too. Since the shelter is closed, I guess it's not closed, but perhaps they don't have the budget that we had been given to them. Can we use that for the libraries? And in a past council meeting, you were each gifted with a box of crispy rice from Staters. On the obverse was a list of ways libraries benefit the communities they serve. Have you ever gone on a long trip and used audiobooks to pass the time? Have you had trouble falling asleep and used a type of medium to overcome your anxiety or stress? If you're like me, you head over to your local library to find something to read. Here are some of the other uses of our libraries. It's a safe place for study groups to meet. They help create and build community with game groups and book clubs. They have reference services, whether you're looking for information to help you with a business proposal, a school project, or even a hobby. The library's extensive reference resources can help you find what you need. For business services, find out how to start a business, find venue capital, promote your product, or develop a business plan. The internet access. Most libraries feature one or more personal computers loaded with a variety of educational and recreational programs for use as well as connection into the World Wide Web. Interlibrary loan. Want to read something the library doesn't have? Many libraries share books and reference materials with other libraries, making more information available to users. Literacy services. The library offers a number of ways to assist users who may have difficulty with their reading skills. Book clubs. Hang out at the library. Need homework help? Looking for great reads for the summer? Need some new tunes? Look no further. The library can help you find the right resources to give you an extra boost in school and in other parts of your life. Library services for youth. Helping young people is very important to public libraries. Find out about many ways in which your local library serves them and learns about the resources the library offers to assist parents and grandparents. Stater Brothers.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. Thank you. Okay, at this, yes, Mr. Schreck.
I'd like to make a comment, please. Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing me. Mr. Hatch, with all due respect, a correction. You talked about the legislative branch, the council, and the mayor. The council has a separate folder here. They're not part of the mayor's office. That 14% you're talking about is solely in the mayor's office. And the council office will be talking about, well, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. I want the public to understand that we do have those We don't have a legislative branch, which is really what we should have, in my view, and based on our new charter, with the mayor being a part of that. But we've got two separate. We've got a city council office and we've got a mayor's office, and the mayor's office is up 14%. We are down by 1%, and we'll probably be down by more when it all is said and done. Thank you.
Mayor,
This time-
I have a letter I'd like to read.
Okay.
Okay. I received a letter from Assemblymember Eloise Reyes this past week. Dear Honorable Councilmember Sandra Ibarra, thank you for sharing ideas from your constituents who are concerned about the future of our animal shelter. I am glad that our community has you as a champion advocating for both the welfare of our animals and the voices of community members who are rightfully concerned. I have reviewed the suggested options, including repairing the facility, allowing community members to manage the shelter, and relocating the shelter to another location in our community. My office is ready to support the most viable option that includes a community-driven approach that can support the long-term sustainability of the San Bernardino Animal Shelter. If you have any further concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to my district office by contacting my field representative. Sincerely, Eloise Gomez Reyes.
Thank you. We'll move on to our staff report section. This time, we will get a report. I think it's a receive and file, but Ms. City Manager, item number 1, certified election results.
Yes, the city clerk actually prepared this item.
Very good. City Clerk.
Mayor, this item discusses why we had a special election as well as the results of that. And the resolution is attached accepting the certification which was done by the Registrar of Voters, and I understand that Mr. Figueroa has already been sworn in, so it's just a matter of the council accepting those results.
Move approval.
Second.
Very good. If members would cast their votes, please.
So on item 1, Mr. Charette made the motion, and the second was made by Mr. Nickel, and the item passes unanimously.
Very good. At this time, I will call forward Councilman Juan Figueroa to take your seat, sir. We welcome you to our council dais, and we wish you many, many years of success as you lead your district, the 3rd Ward. Congratulations. Very good. Well, Councilman, it's a good feeling to be addressing you as councilman now. And I was elated to swear Councilman Figueroa on Thursday in my office. We thank our city clerk and our city staff for making those accommodations, and we appreciate the councilman and his family for joining us for that event. Item number 2 is relocation of our city council meetings to Feldheim Library. Ms. City Manager.
Mayor, it might seem strange to have this item on a budget hearing matter, but we wanted to bring this forward because, we've been going back and forth on different locations to meet. You decided not to meet at the IBDA due to costs. So this was one of the options we'd previously brought forward. And the reason we're asking you tonight to make this decision is we have several public hearings coming up, and the departments need to post those. So we'd like to know if you'd like us to move the meetings over to the library. There's sufficient room. There's 266 seats. I know the mayor toured the library. There's a place for a closed session room, and we think it'd be an ideal spot. Public Works can improve the parking lot, so there's more striping and space, and the lighting is good. But it's certainly up to you. But if you approve it tonight, we would start our meetings there on August 7th.
Very good. I did tour the facility, was very excited to see some of the improvements at our Feldheim Library, our main library. New carpet. We've done a lot of improvements to the roof, and we're over the past three or 4 years, substantial improvements via CDBG funding have been provided there for our central main library. So we're excited about that. The Bing Wong Auditorium is ample seating and will accommodate a big crowd. And so that's for your entertainment tonight, Council. If we can get a motion on that or comments.
I move to approve it.
Right.
Second.
Mayor, I received a question from somebody in the audience today. If this is approved, will the commission meetings also be over at Bing Wong, or will they be held here? I believe we'll still hold them here in this room. I think it would serve a better purpose here.
Okay, very good.
Can we comment on the decision
I'm sorry. No. No. We need to move on. We're going to conduct business. All right. Are there any comments from the council? If not, members will cast their votes. Yes, Mr. Figueroa.
Which buttons to push here? Just a quick question on that. I do notice on, forgive me, I'm still trying to figure this out, but there is an explanation of where the dais is going to be, the entry and all that other stuff. But what I didn't notice on there is where the public podium will be located. Where's that going to take place as well? Because this is the people's meeting. So where will they have the opportunity to speak?
Very good question, and we actually have two brand-new podiums because when we were going to move to IVDA, they purchased them. They're still working on the spacing over there, and as soon as we have a map, we'll get that to you, but they can't block the aisles, obviously, so they'll be up towards the front. But as soon as we get a map and get over there, now, if you make your decision, then we'll get over there and get it drawn out.
Certainly, we appreciate our Public Works team for making those improvements and accommodations for our public. We certainly don't want to deter public comment and their interaction with the council. All right, if there's no more comments, if members would please cast their votes.
On item 2, the motion to approve was made by Mr. Nickel, the second by Ms. Ibarra, and the item passes 6-1 with Mr. Mulvihill voting no.
Very good. Moving on to item number 3, the presentation of our fiscal year 2019-20 proposed budget. Our next agenda item is a presentation of the 2019-2020 proposed budget. It is important to note that the council will not be making any major decisions tonight concerning the budget. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for the council to receive and review the staff recommendations as provided in the public package. As you will hear, our city is facing an $11 million budget deficit. Let me be clear, we are not going back into bankruptcy. We are not going back into bankruptcy. Yes, we have a deficit, and that is largely due to poor forecasting in our last budget. However, the city is still in strong financial shape. Cutting $11 million is not a small or easy task. There will be many tough decisions to be made in how to prioritize our limited financial resources. We also need to look at how we can increase revenues to our city. Costs will always go up. We need to address our income. Our income also needs to correspond, and it needs to rise as well. Several months ago, I made that overture, and in my conversations with then our city manager suggested that revenues is really where we need to be concentrating as a city council. In order to study the budget and staff recommendations in more detail, I'm announcing the formation of the Economic Development Ad Hoc Council Committee, and in accordance with Section 303 of the San Bernardino City Charter, I hereby appoint the following members and officers to the committee. Councilmember Henry Nichols serving as chairman, Councilmember Theodore Sanchez as voting member, and Councilmember Juan Figueroa as voting member. The purpose of the Economic Development Council shall be to review the city budget and to provide recommendations to the full council on fiscal stabilization measures and revenue generation opportunities no later than June 5, 2019. This time, I'll ask the city manager to make her presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Interim Finance Director Rita Conrad and I will be going through the PowerPoint presentation with you this evening, and our department heads are certainly here to answer any questions as we get towards their proposed cuts. I realize the deficit is alarming, but I want to assure you that staff is committed to continuing to look for ways to streamline operations and increase revenues. We continue to be fiscally prudent. As the city exited bankruptcy, the recovery plan, the plan of adjustment, recognized that in order to remain solvent, reducing expenditures alone would not be enough. On June 15th, I would be providing the City Council with an update to the plan of adjustment, and we can use this new committee as well. What's been accomplished thus far, what's in progress, and what's left to be accomplished. As for animal control, I want to point out that when this preliminary budget was printed, we still thought we were contracting out, so this still contains the $2.1 million contracting out to Riverside County. It will be fixed in the final budget. And finally, before we get started with the presentation, I really want to thank our finance staff, Rita and Dixon and Shelby. They put in countless hours, and they've done a great job. Our department heads worked together to come up with these cuts. They certainly were not easy, but they worked together so that we don't impact the city as much as we could have. So they've worked really hard, and I want to thank them. Rita's going to get the presentation going, and she's going to start by doing an overview of the general fund, revenues, expenditures, reserves, and the budget deficit reduction strategies will follow.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Excuse me. Before we get into the actual overview of the general fund, I think it's important just to put the budget in context of the economy. There's some strong points for the city. Unemployment's all-time low of 5.2%. In 2012, unemployment was 14.3%, so that's a big improvement. Sales tax is finally returning to pre-recession levels of about $36 million. But we have other challenges. The housing crisis that you hear so much about in California, we still face that. The median home price here is $267,000. That's up 123% from 2012 when a median house price was $120,000. Median income is about $41,000. That's up 5% from 2012, which is only about $1,900. So you can see wages are not keeping pace with housing, and that's a county and statewide issue. The next graph just shows you for median income where San Bernardino stands compared to the county. The city's red, county's green, and the state's purple. So we've remained relatively consistent since 2012. And you can see we're lagging behind the county and the state. But you can see that even for the county, even though they're ahead of us, they haven't had big increases since 2012 either. It's a county and statewide problem. So like the city manager said, this budget is a status quo budget, meaning we asked departments to turn in budgets that didn't include any new programs, any new staffing positions other than those that were previously approved by the council and mayor at other council meetings. Revenues are overall flat. You'll see when we talk about those that there's increases and decreases. They kind of offset each other. So there is some good news that was kind of overshadowed by some other adjustments. The problems on expenditures, they've increased by 10%, although I want to echo what the mayor said, that our revenues continue to climb, or excuse me, our expenditures continue to climb, but we have a revenue problem. Revenues are flattening out. Again, it's not just San Bernardino. It's an issue that we're seeing. You're going to see articles for our neighboring cities. Everybody's kind of facing the same issues. Rising costs aren't keeping pace with revenues. So that brings us to our deficit of $11.2 million. The next chart here is just so that you can see revenues to expenditures. The expenditures are orange. For the current year, when the budget was adopted for the current year, the finance director at that time, with the information he had available, had projected that we would have a surplus, a very modest surplus of $798,000. As we did our mid-year presentation and looked through various items, and factored in ongoing bankruptcy costs, which were higher than had been anticipated. There was also some conscious decision to use reserves. The council, recognizing the need for CIP projects, authorized the use of $4 million of reserves for some CIP projects. Then there was issue with some expenditures that were previously in gas tax having to be moved to the general fund, which we covered extensively at mid-year. So that's why you see the middle graph. Our expenditures are a lot higher than revenues for the current year. For the proposed year, again, status quo budget, we're looking at about $11.2 million deficit. General fund revenues for 1920 are projected to be about $127.4 million. It's a minor increase, 0.5% increase compared to the current adopted budget. And as I said, there were some increases, but they were offset by decreases, and we'll get to those. This chart is helpful because you can see where we get the majority of our revenues from. Our biggest revenue source is sales tax at $36.6 million. And, there we go. Thanks, Mitch. Gremlins. So, if sales tax sneezes, we all get a cold because we're very dependent on that. Our second source is $23.7 million for utility users tax, and the third biggest revenue is our property tax in lieu of VLF, which is about 13% of total general fund revenues. And ideally, you like to see a balanced mix of revenues so that we're not so dependent on any one single source. The 1% sales tax that the city gets is relatively flat, slight decrease compared to the current year that we're projecting. One of the reasons for that is the California Department of Taxation and Fee Administration implemented a new software system. And you've probably read about this. There were a lot of problems with it. A lot of sales tax submittals were not made in time. Cities didn't get their payments in time. What this did was it caused a lot of catch-up payments in 1819. So it makes 1819 look artificially high. And then it makes, because 1819 has a lot of catch-up payments in it, it makes 1920 look low. But if you were to adjust for that, sales tax actually increased about 4 to 5%. And our new council member, Councilman Figueroa, actually sent me an email on that. He caught that in the overview. So, but it's important to note that sometimes things on a cash basis mask what's truly happening. Utility users tax, we've had a lot of discussion about this since mid-year. We lowered the estimates based on actuals. You can kind of see the historical projection record there of where they've been, and we haven't seen anything to indicate that it's going to be much higher or lower than the current fiscal year. Property tax revenue, that is the property tax in lieu of VLF that we get. The ad valorem property tax, we no longer receive that. That was part of the annexation of fire services into the county fire district. So that bar all the way over on the left reflects before the annexation happened. And you can see where it's slowly going up. It's based on assessed valuation. So as assessed valuation goes up, our property tax in lieu of VLF goes up. The amount for 1920 is about $1 million higher than the adopted 1819 and about $880,000 higher than the mid-year estimate. Other general fund revenues, Measure Z is up about 1.4% from mid-year estimate to $9 million. We talked about the water fund contribution and the issues with Proposition 218. So as we talked about mid-year, we've reduced that by $2.1 million, which is about a 50% reduction. You'll see a master services agreement coming forward to you soon between us and the water department, where we finally come to agreement on a number. Special events. We have not budgeted any cannabis revenue at this time, except for cannabis revenue related to special events. And we worked with the city manager's office and community and economic development to come up with that number. So it's a new revenue. And then licenses and permits, which include business registration and development related revenue, are up about $528,000 to about $10.5 million. General fund expenditures are up about 10% compared to the adopted budget for 1819. Total general fund expenditures are about $138.5 million. Again, status quo budget. Departments held to existing levels. There are a lot of things that are outside the control of departments. PERS costs, salary and benefit cost. When we hold them to status quo, that means no new materials and supplies, no new contractual, no new adding positions. But of course, then we adjust their budgets for PERS and salary and benefit costs, internal service charges, utilities. The biggest driver is salary and benefit costs relating to this deficit. And as the city manager told you, this incorporates contracting out animal control, because at the time the preliminary budget was printed, that was the assumption that animal control would be contracted out. So this chart's helpful just to see where our expenditures are. You can see the lion's share is the police department at 65%, but it's also important to note that animal control is a part of the police department's budget. So about $2.1 million of that big blue half of the pie is animal control. And then public works is the next biggest piece at 12%. And all of this is in the budget document. There's a section called Budget Overview, which really gets into a lot of detail on this too. So salary and benefits increased by about $3 million. One of the reasons the city entered into these MOUs that we've had a lot of discussion about was pertaining to employee retention and attraction, especially within public safety, merit increases, and then there were a few reorganizations that occurred during the year that were approved by the mayor and council that have been factored into this budget. The PERS unfunded liability payment increased by about $3.7 million in the general fund. So that's a total payment that we pay annually of about $23.75 million. We do prepay it every year to save money, and this year it's about $400,000 if we prepay it early. Some other things that contributed to the deficit was the loss of the COPS grant, which partially funded 11 police officers, I believe. $781,000 of it is going away this year. That's about 75%. Next year, another $250,000 will be subtracted from the budget. So we have about a quarter year's funding for it this year. Debt service on the pension obligation bonds has a step-up provision. Those were renegotiated during the bankruptcy, and then after so many years, the payment steps up. This is the first step up. There'll be a few more years before it steps up again. The other big change is we usually budget a credit, or the city's had a practice of budgeting a credit for public works staff time to CIP projects, which means other funds. Because there's not as many CIP projects to be done, there's less public works staff to charge time out. This has never been a historically good number. It's been at like $1 million, and they've never been able to really reach more than 300,000. So we're adjusting that downward. They still feel with more aggressive management, they'll be able to reach about a $500,000 credit to other funds. They've made some improvements in that area. Then we talked about bankruptcy costs. We included that in the budget this year, $1.5 million. That is down about $2.7 million compared to the bankruptcy costs that were paid in the current year. They're estimated to be about $4.2 million. So we're seeing some improvement there. Of that $1.5 million, about $720,000 of it is for legal costs. And then the remainder is for some settlements that have already been determined that we're obligated to pay, and they will drop off in a few years. Internal service funds are up about $1.4 million. Those are the charges for workers' comp, liability, information technology, and fleet services. All their budgets get charged back to general fund budgets. They have employees. They have unfunded liability. All that gets factored back to general fund budgets. There was in the fleet department, we did at one time receive a $400,000 fuel credit, which it was a federal fuel credit, and that's no longer going to be available next year. So those, and workers' comp and liability insurance premiums have gone up about $400,000. So those are some of the things contributing to that $1.4 million. We talked about gas tax, about $850,000 of operational costs that were previously paid by gas tax now have to be paid annually by the general fund. So even though that's an impact to the general fund, the good thing is it helps us with our maintenance of effort for the Measure I monies, because we were having a problem showing that we were meeting our general fund obligation towards Measure I funds. The expenditure savings credit, the city has had a practice in the past of proposing a budget and then knowing with a budget as big as the city's that there's going to be a certain amount of savings, especially with vacancies in the police department. So in the past, they've budgeted a credit to reflect that. In the current year's budget, to adopt the budget that we're in now, 25 vacant positions were eliminated. You're going to see coming forward, there's going to be 73 more positions suggested for elimination. So we need to lower that credit. There's no way we'll meet $3 million. We believe we can meet just under $2 million. But we'll come back at mid-year to see how we're doing with that. The city attorney's office, they, compared to the adopted budget, their budget is reduced by $713,900. And then if you remember for the current year budget, the previous year when they were developing the budget, they had reduced it by $497,000. And now there's a $713,000 additional savings for 1920. This chart is just useful so you can see how our fund balance has kind of moved around a lot. You can see in the really lean years, in 2012, when the city was entering bankruptcy, we were down pretty low. Our general fund balance jumped up in 15-16 with the sale of refuse. And we've managed to stay at that level. There were a lot of one-time revenues and one-time expenditures in 17-18 that brought our reserves up quite a bit. Timing of debt service payments, one-time transfers from trust funds or agency funds, the one-time catch-up on the VLF, all those things caused us to be able to bump up our reserves a little bit in 17-18. But then as we talked about for 18-19, with all the issues, it's projected to go down about 20 to 25 million. Hopefully it will be a little bit higher. We'll do another update and see where we're doing, but that was our mid-year update. If we don't address the $11.2 million deficit, our reserves combined would be about 14.6 million. This chart, and it's also in the budget, just kind of gives you an idea by category of our reserves. The council in November of 2018 approved a general fund reserve policy. If things stay as they are and we don't address the deficit, you can see that we'll be about 12 million short of our reserve. We won't have any economic contingency reserve, the 10% reserve, and our target for an emergency reserve would be about 19 million, and we'd be about 4 million short. So with that, we're now going to get into some of the deficit reduction strategies proposed by departments, and I'll turn it over to Terry Ledoux.
Thank you, Rita. Now for the tough part. We're going to go through the deficit reduction strategies. As mentioned before, the departments were asked to come up with 7 to 8% cuts, which we're going to briefly discuss in the next few slides. If you look in attachment 2 to your budget and your budget books, it gives you more detail. I'm just going to be going over the summary, and certainly stop me, and we have the department heads here to answer any questions that you may have. As Rita mentioned, this is the elimination of 73.5 full-time equivalent positions. 25 of those are filled. And after bumping, we're hoping to be able to lower that amount or place them in other jobs. Certainly not an easy thing to do. We're going to start with the city clerk. Their proposed 7% cut was $64,800. She's doing that by recommending the cut of one senior customer service rep, it's a vacant position, and other miscellaneous supplies and training. City manager's office, I was able to recommend a cut of $415,700, which is equivalent to 12%. And this is done by deleting a vacant apprentice position, transferring one, and this was also including adding a position from the police department to save them money. And this is the community engagement specialist in the police department. She could offer citywide communication services, so I'd be transferring her to our office. And then the other areas that were cut were the communications budget. We cut about $117,000. Administrative services, $101,000. The violence intervention program, the recommended cut is mainly $75,000 from the California Partnership for Safe Communities, just reducing that contract amount, so it'd be $200,000 instead of $275,000. And then the customer and neighborhood services, about $13,000. I do want to note that the council had approved the Neighborhood Association Resource Program this year in the amount of $49,500, and we were able to keep that contained within the budget so we could continue that program. Sorry. Community and Economic Development is proposing to cut 7%, which is $307,900. And that's cutting 2 vacant positions, the chief building official and the senior planner, and reducing some other costs. I do want to note the police department and community and economic development have been working on a plan that maybe later on down the road or at mid-year could help fill this chief building official position. We'll be bringing something back to you later for that. The finance department's 7% cut was $288,700. They were also able to cut 2 vacant positions. One person promoted. We're cutting the bottom position, and he'll be overseeing those 2 things. And then they reduced some education and training and other professional and contractual. Human Resources, $82,200 is their 7%. They're cutting some part-time positions and some other, like the Employee Appreciation Event. Well, hopefully we'll be able to find some other funding or donations to be able to continue with that. And then they reduce some education, training, and other professional accounts. Am I going too fast? Please feel free to stop me. Okay. IT, their 7% cut was $353,000. And this cutting the position of the GIS system administrator. They have a person who's ready to retire, so it was an opportunity to not have to cut a filled position. And then they did some other deferring implementation of other software and other things this time. The legislative branch, we'll call it, typically was under one tab, but two different divisions within the budget. I think it's separate in this preliminary budget. What we did was we took budgets for both those together. We took out the elected officials because, as I mentioned, we don't have the option of recommending to get rid of any of you. So that was the 7% cut, was $103,600 for those combined offices. And we also have an employee who is ready to retire in the city council office. So what we did was we took, in order to make the 7% cut, that person's total salary was $125,500. We're recommending that you take $77,700 as your cut, and you put aside $50,000 so that you can reorganize later as a group, decide how you want that money spent and what those offices look like in the future. But that money is available to do that. Okay.
Sure. This is the one I brought up a minute ago. I'm not quite sure I understand why this PowerPoint shows this as combined and legislative, and in here it's two separate departments.
We just made a decision to combine the elected offices together.
So this doesn't mean anything?
It does. Typically in the budget, it's under one legislative tab with two different divisions, and it got separated in this preliminary budget, but it is two separate budgets.
So this 14% increase in the mayor's office is not accurate?
Which 14% increase?
Under the mayor's office and a 1% decrease in the council's office. Am I reading this wrong?
I think,
oh, go ahead.
I think, no, in the preliminary budget, what you're seeing is correct. Then for purposes of coming up with a reduction, they just took the council budget and the mayor's budget and added them together and then backed out all the elected officials to come up with a number and then took 7% of that number.
Councilmember Shred, I think I know where you're going with this, and I probably should have
well,
pointed this.
No,
go ahead.
Where we're going with it is the city is not strong. We're not in good shape. I'd like to put a happy face on it, as the mayor has and as you have. We're not following the charter, in my view, based on this. And I see this, I'm sorry to say it, I hate to see the reductions. We're not going in the right direction. We're going backwards, people. We're going backwards, folks. And I have a hard time understanding, and maybe I should understand it better. Maybe that's my fault, that I have a budget over here, and then I have this thing over here, and they just don't jive. They just don't jive. And it doesn't make sense. And I think the public needs to understand and be able to read this stuff and understand it. And we need to be honest with our public that we are not in good shape. We are just not.
Fred, you're absolutely correct, but I do want to explain.
I don't like being right in that case.
This budget is if without any cuts. This is $138 million with only $127 in revenue. That's why we didn't implement the cuts in this budget. We're asking you to do that. That's not our decision to make. We're just making the recommendation. So you're right, they don't jive.
Please
Mayor?
proceed. Go ahead.
I have a question. Okay, if anybody follows the council staff, we lost already one of our assistants in December. She got moved to our mayor's office. We also have another staff member who is on leave currently. And now we're cutting another one. We're just being left with one assistant in the council office. And you said that this was by the department heads. This would be the council. If you're cutting our staff in our council office, shouldn't that have come before us? I mean,
that's why it's coming before you now. Yeah.
So who made that call on who put our staff member as a cut?
Jorge came to us and said, I'm going to be retiring. So we thought that was the path of least resistance to recommend, so we don't have to cut a full-time position, a filled position. It's certainly your decision to make.
Yeah, because this is causing how can I say it? It's going to put a burden on the only one staff member that we have currently.
Well, Councilmember, the other alternative is, as presented by the city manager, is part-time allocation from the cost savings of Jorge. So cost savings for a part-time to supplement and support that loss of position.
Is the mayor's office also going to do some cuts on his end?
So we have proposed we have proposed $26,000 worth of cuts in the mayor's office.
26,000
Correct.
out of 800,000?
26,000.
That's all from
Okay,
me.
let's.
For a mayor that's, we don't need as, under the new charter,
Okay.
with all the staff.
Let's.
And in order to have a chief of staff, it would seem that you ought to have a staff. And the mayor, under the new charter, doesn't need a staff. He needs to be the leader of this body.
Please proceed, Ms. City Manager.
Mayor, the next slide is on the library. Their 7% cut would be $139,600, but as Dr. Clark pointed out earlier, that an additional $90,000 is needed to fund their security costs because that is one of the police department's proposed cuts. So that's quite a bit of money. An alternative to the council may want to consider is using the Cultural Development Impact Fee Fund. As you know, this fund typically funds typical arts projects and things like that. I think you gave $300,000 last year to the commission to give out in grants. That's certainly an option to help the library with books and other things. If you don't want to make that deep of a cut or the cut at all, we believe that fund could cover that. That's certainly your option. Well, what we would do is we would fund the other things that qualify for that source of funding, and it would free up enough money to pay for the security and keep the branches open. I want to back up on that side because as the council is aware, while you tell the library how much they can spend, the board gets to decide how that money is spent. Any other questions on the library? Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, their 7% cut was $324,500. They're proposing to eliminate 13.8 part-time equivalents and various other programs. This one I want to point out as well, because this would be, the recommendation is to eliminate the following city events, which I know are very popular. The Winter Wonderland, Veterans Day Parade, San Bernardino Arts Fest, Cinco de Mayo, Movies in the Park. Again, we want to certainly bring you another option. Instead of eliminating these, you could also use the Cultural Development Fund for some of those purposes. Public Works, and these are backwards in your book. We did police last because it's the biggest, so in your book, if you're looking towards it, then you're going to want to go to Public Works, which is in the end. They actually proposed a 9% cut, which is $1.9 million, and they're cutting several, recommending the elimination of several positions, some which are filled. And then other areas included engineering, concrete repairs, streetlight maintenance, and generally setting the department back to the 17-18 levels, which none of us like to do. That's their proposal. Any questions on Public Works?
I have a question.
Okay.
These are these extra positions that we can do without, or are these actual employees that we currently have that are servicing our city right now?
Some of the positions are filled. So if you go to the Public Works tab in your book, you can see which ones.
Councilmember Barr, it's this sheet right here.
Page
It's a
493.
worksheet.
It provides more detail. Councilmember Barr, it should be with your staff report in a separate document.
It's this worksheet, Sandra. Did you give that to her?
It's an attachment to the staff report.
Yeah, an attachment to the staff report. There you go.
I just want to make sure that we are still going to be having our staff to provide the services the city needs to run per the plan of adjustment.
Yeah.
Because if we're cutting positions that are currently useful right now that the city needs, and we're cutting them, that's my biggest concern.
That's what we're doing.
There's vacant and filled positions that are being proposed to be cut, and in the fill, there's 5 positions total that are currently filled that we're recommending to be cut. And they may have bumping rights, they may not, and the rest of the positions are vacant. Any other questions on Public Works? Okay, we saved the big one for last. PD is actually proposing an 8% cut, which is $7.1 million. There are several positions, some of which are filled, and again, if you look at your police tab, you can see in more detail about the cuts. Any questions on the positions themselves before I get to the other?
Well, Ms. City Manager, at the very outset, correct me if I have a wrong assumption.
Okay,
There are no active sworn officers in our police budget that are going to get a pink slip.
that's correct.
No active sworn police officers will get a pink slip. Vacant positions, talk to us about vacant positions not filled.
There are 10 vacant police officer positions that would not be filled under this proposal.
All right.
And then, go ahead.
Comment?
Go ahead, Mr. Charette.
Let's not forget the 7 that we reclassified. That's really honest to the public, is a total of 17 P1s. That's 17 police officers that are either we don't have, or we reclassified, and we're not doing enough cutting. It was said earlier by one of the public, and we haven't, from the beginning, as far as I know, and I've been here longer than anybody, we're not cutting at the top. I come from the printing industry, and if I'm going to continue to provide services to my clients, I need people running presses. And generally speaking, they're not making the same kind of money that a supervisor is. So when I run into difficult times, I keep those press people, those people working and delivering and getting the job and getting the orders to my customers, and I cut at higher levels because I can save more money easier. They get more money so they can do more. And if they want to keep their job, they're going to do more. In public sector, it's not quite that easy because contracts and other things. But we've got to start. We've been talking about this paradigm as a private company or the private sector and trying to operate like a corporation, and we're not doing that. We're just not doing that. And this is not, in my view, terribly honest with our constituents. And it's not easy it's easy to not be honest because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, and the people here work with it every day. Our constituents don't. They trust us, and I have a real problem with this, cutting libraries and keeping staff members in the mayor's office, cutting 17 P1s or not filling those positions, and keeping lieutenants and captains. I just can't sit here and not say this. So I'm not happy with this. I don't think anybody up here is happy with it, but I don't think we're being real honest with our constituents and our citizens.
If I may, I'd like to respond to that.
Mr. Sanchez.
That's an opinion.
Yeah, and I have an opinion myself. The professionals who have a vested interest ensuring our fiscal integrity as a city and those who are charged with our public safety have spoken loudly and clearly. And they said that this is the restructuring they need. I know you referenced the printing press or your printing company. This is different. This is different. And the professionals have spoken loudly and clearly. They back this system up because it's a proven method. I really think that this shouldn't be an argument. Again, we're not handing out any pink slips to any police officers who are being entrusted with our safety. This is what they've asked for to do the job that we've expected them to do. We have to afford them that opportunity. I will be the first one to make these cuts if I don't see that happen. But I don't think that we've even given them a fair chance. How long has this program been implemented for? A month? 3 weeks?
With the 17 empty positions?
We're talking about the restructuring of the police department.
About that.
All right, well, that's what I have to say.
17 P1s that are not going to be filled under this budget. Boots on the ground. People that are responding to calls. That's all. So,
Okay.
And that's a fact.
Why don't we allow our staff to continue their presentation? And this is the biggest cut. I know council members want to probably opine, and how about we let them present, and then we'll comment. Please proceed, ma'am.
Would you like Chief McBride to
Sure.
come up and talk
Absolutely.
about staffing needs? I think he's better qualified.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Definitely when we got the number that we had to come to in cuts, it wasn't easy to come there. And quite frankly, I'd rather have 100 more police officers. But we have to understand the realities of police work and the city's finances. So that being said, with respect to management positions and supervisory positions, there's a long history in law enforcement of being inadequately staffed with supervision and managers, which have led to tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits, consent decrees and other things where departments have been ordered by federal and state courts to properly staff managers and supervisors to have proper supervision out there. So with that in mind, we looked at our cuts and what way could we easily make cuts and still deliver the core service of police service to the community. And obviously one of the first cuts we did is we eliminated currently vacant positions because there wouldn't be an impact on an individual. And we understand that every cut, every position eliminated potentially had the impact of eliminating someone's employment with the city, and we took that very seriously. That being said, we also looked at an M&O budget and looked at what we could cut, realizing that there's still a huge amount of support mechanisms, whether that's buying fuel or new cars or bullets for police officers to carry, that are costs that are needed in the police department as well. And we minimized the amount of stuff that we needed to purchase over the next fiscal year. And then it came to the hard decision of what positions that were currently filled would be cut. And so we looked at what our core service was in the police department, and that was deliver public safety. And one way we looked at that with respect to supervision and management is that we needed to make sure that we had adequate supervision to make sure that people are providing an efficient, quality level of service to the community to making sure that's done. I think we can look back over the history of the city and just see pre-bankruptcy when we were talking about budget cuts and the management positions, many management positions in the fire department were cut. That resulted in poor management and supervision in the police department, or fire department rather, and the end result is we see that we no longer have a city fire department. And so we have to look at properly supervising and managing the department to make sure that we deliver the service that the community expects with the minimal impacts given the budget cuts. So with that, it was a tough decision, but we made the decisions that we needed to. And with respect to staffing in the police department, if you look back over the last 5 years, we actually have more police officers in uniform sitting in briefing than we've had over the last 5 or 6 years, because we've made a very strong effort to make sure that we are aggressively recruiting and have staff on hand to go out there and deliver the service. So we actually have more police officers staffed currently than we have in the last 5 years.
How many P1 compared to that same time?
Actually, I think we were increasing the numbers, so we reduced the increase. So basically, I think very close to that number. What is it, Dave?
We're talking about staffed P1s. Under the proposed budget, we would now have 151 staffed P1s. This current fiscal year, we've had 149.
The previous year.
And we're talking about staffed positions, not funded positions. And the reason we have more staffed positions is because we have made significant progress in filling our vacancies.
So 149 and 151?
149 to 151. So without cuts, we could achieve 161. But instead of making that level of progress and achieving 161 with the proposed cuts, we would achieve 151 staffed P1 positions.
But we would have savings if we cut at higher levels and gave higher captains, lieutenants, and sergeants that are paid much, much more. We want boots on the ground, on the street. And I just don't believe the numbers right now. So maybe we can talk about that offline. I don't believe them. We'll talk about it.
I have one last question. If you could refamiliarize
Hold on, Mr. Sanchez. Hold on. Ms. Hanna, we're going to invoke the 5-minute rule, and I'm going to ask that you start the time and you keep time on council members. So if you'd like to use your 5 minutes, let's go ahead and begin it.
If you can reacquaint me with if you can reacquaint me with the case in Riverside, I believe there was a court order to increase management staff in the police department. If you could,
there was an incident about 20 years ago or more where the city of Riverside had an incident that they were placed under a consent decree by state court. That required that they increase their supervision and management in their police department. And if you were to compare their per capita numbers against ours, you would see that they're quite a bit higher, which actually is a lot more. And part of the reason for that is the courts have made a determination that, adequate supervision and management decreases liability for a police department. And that's important to decrease that because we are involved in a profession that has a lot of liability involved. And there's, things that you guys are privy to that you're aware of that. And so it's, adequate supervision, having a supervisor sometimes can abate that potential issue from happening before it does, saving the city potentially tens of millions of dollars.
Because that's what we talk about when we talk about liability, right? When there's proper, adequate supervision, the likelihood of a case where there's an unprovoked police shooting or whatever may cause some sort of lawsuit that may cost the city millions of dollars could be prevented with adequate management, right?
Absolutely. And, there was a reference to management, lieutenants to employee, and we're roughly at about 40 police employees for every one manager. And when you look at that, what does that really mean? So there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of things that are done within the police department that generate paperwork that has to be reviewed, that has to make sure that it's completed, that it's accurate, and that the people are doing their job. Quite frankly, in the last several years, when we didn't have adequate management or supervision, there were quite a few things that slipped through the cracks, which has cost the police department in cases not being filed. So not delivering that service to the community that we should be delivering, that the service that the community requires us to deliver, and not having that adequate supervision and management causes those issues and those problems to slip through the cracks. And when you have people who have a caseload of reports and work product that they have to review, and it's adequate for their level, then it gets done and it saves the city, makes sure that the liability is reduced, but also make sure that the work is being done.
Very good. I want to also remind our council that this 2019 fiscal budget workshop that we're entertaining here tonight, and we're hearing presentations from our city staff, it forces our departments to identify the inefficiencies, streamline responsibilities, and duties that they oversee. It also allows our city council to renegotiate contracts and identify and isolate vendors and service contract providers that are ineffective and not producing. This is not a negative process. This is a necessary and beneficial audit of what we are spending our tax dollars on, and whether that aligns with the goals of this community and the priorities thereof. Recognize Mr. Mulvihill.
Yes, I think Fred talking about the P1s, I think if you ask residents, and what's always being brought up, it's response times. And when you look at supervisors, are supervisors people that respond to calls for burglaries and so forth?
They absolutely can and do. The role of the supervisor in patrol, for example, is to make sure that the officers go to their call, that they resolve it in a quick and efficient manner, and then get on to the next call. Without adequate supervision, that doesn't always happen in the way it should. And so having a supervisor available in the field to do field inspections, to show up on calls, ensures that adequate supervision is taking place and that officers are freed up from that call as soon as possible to respond to the next one.
Yeah, I think given the circumstances, it really is necessary to examine just in terms of proficiency and performance is how much time for the supervisors is being spent responding to calls. Because, again, what the citizens are looking at is response times. And more often than not, it's response times that are just not acceptable. And so what I'm looking for is, this whole discussion here, what you're proposing is to chip into the fact that we've got an 11 and so many $1 million budget deficit. And so all that we're hearing here are ways in which we can get rid of that budget deficit and we don't have to dip into our reserves. And of course, these are just proposals, and what we can do is, again, look over all the departments and to make changes where we see them. It's been proposed looking at the mayor's office and looking at the city council office and so forth in terms of looking for more cuts. It just seems rational that we need to take an objective look at this. You know, put the egos aside and see where the work gets done, who's doing the work, and where we can cut some of the surplus. And so I think it's important to examine not just what's proposed here. This is aimed at eliminating that $11 million deficit. And what we need to do, well, of course, obviously, we could fund the 160 P1 officers and just dip into the reserves, you know, but we don't want to do that. They did that, you know, before 2012. And so the reality is these are just proposals, and that, again, looking at, again, citizens look at response times. Again, take a good look at what the performance takes place in terms of supervisorial performance, and see how often they're engaged and active responding to calls coming in. But also, too, as we go through this, take a look and see if there's some obvious places that that the budget can be cut a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Mulvihill brings up great points. I think to bring us back to baseline, folks, is this is a revenue issue. This is a revenue issue, and we're facing a dilemma here at our city council as we contemplate some of these major cuts. Tonight, we're addressing more than $11 million deficit the city faces. We are addressing the city's approach on operations. Our exit from bankruptcy did not cue an immediate transition to prosperity. We still have plenty of work to do and to complete to achieve the firm financial stability we desire as a community. We start tonight by evaluating every contract, every project, and department to streamline efforts, to eliminate duplication, and to cut excess. That is our priority, is to understand how we can streamline. Many of what you have received in the budget tonight on this 23-page document provides staff's response in their cuts. They have identified, and I'm very appreciative of our city management and our city staff for the very hard work that you have done to provide and sharpen the pencil to come up with these cost savings. At this time, Councilman Nickel.
Yeah, and I think, you know, at the end of the day, a city exists to provide services to its residents, right? If we aren't doing that, then what are we doing, right? And if we do that well, we should have sufficient revenue. We should attract the type of residents that want to live here, that are willing to pay, that are going to contribute to the property values, that are going to raise the value of properties so that we have the revenues to pay the people needed to provide the level of service that's required. I really get discouraged when we get in these budget discussions and clearly we have a revenue problem. And my serious concern with this budget, and I think getting to the police component of this budget now, it's sort of simplistic to say, well, we need to cut 7% of revenue, so every department now cuts 7%. I'll be honest, there are probably some departments where we probably need to make some strategic investments now and over the next couple years to make sure that we improve the quality of life enough so we can start growing those revenues. What I don't see in this, I don't see any discussion about how we're going to grow revenue over the next year. I don't see that here. And those are the comments I'm getting from my constituents. Okay, how are you going to grow revenues? Stop arguing about who's going to get the cuts. Start arguing about how we're going to grow our revenue base. Seems like year after year we're arguing about what else we can cut. Oh, who got more money than somebody else? Well, I'll be honest, that's really not the discussion we need to be having. We need to be having a discussion about how we are going to grow an anemic budget. When you put our budget side by side with most of our surrounding cities per capita, sorry folks, we just aren't cutting it anymore. And I'm tired of the arguments between departments. Well, you need to cut. We cut last year, you need to cut now. And what are we doing? We're racing to the bottom, folks. We are racing to the bottom. If we don't start having an honest discussion about how we are going to improve the efficiency and delivery of the services that we can provide now, in the context of strategically growing our revenues over the next 5 to 10 years. Other cities have done it. Okay, Detroit's doing it right now. Guess what? There's other parts of the country that are digging out of the hole that they've got themselves in. And what are we finding ourselves doing here tonight? Once again, arguing about who's going to get the cut, rather than really having an honest, intelligent discussion about how we are going to start turning this boat around and growing revenues, rising that tide in our city. So I do have some questions for our chief. I do believe that what we've been doing has not necessarily been working. I think we see response times declining. We're seeing our crime rate exploding. Okay, we have a problem here, folks, in terms of crime. And I'll be honest, a lot of that is contributing to the exodus of good people and good businesses that would otherwise provide us with the tax revenues, to provide the services, to fill the potholes that we need to be filled, to pay for the library services that people deserve. Okay? So let's be honest about what we're dealing with here. Let's not decline into sophomoric arguments over, well, who gets the cut this year because we don't like what they got last year. In terms of the structure of the department, Chief, do you have the staff? Do you have the structure? Do you have the resources you need to move the needle this year in terms of crime reduction? Will this start moving us in the direction, or are these just simply cuts that are going to lead to more decline in police response times and service?
You know, under the previous structure in the police department, we had a responsive organization that responded just basically calls for service. And part of the restructure was the community policing is also a problem-solving component to that, and the restructure with district command. And we can simply keep responding to the same calls, or we can try to attack those problems to make those types of calls go down and reduce the overall amount of calls we respond to, and thereby increase the response, or improve the response time, so to speak. And that's the effort that we're undertaking with the restructure of the police department, is become more efficient, to look at the root causes of crime. We've embraced the VIP program. We're going to move forward on that very soon with the next step. And we think all these things can contribute to an overall reduction in crime. But it starts with looking at the root problems in crime under this restructure. And if we don't do that, if we don't maintain our course of action, when you look at most consent decrees, the courts order departments to go to community policing. And we see which direction we're going, and we need to go in the direction where we're going to start solving problems in the city. And doing that is through community policing and problem solving, which we've already moved in that direction. And along with some other core community programs, we think we can attack the overall crime problem and reduce the calls for service, and then also reduce the response times.
Okay, so just to be clear, this cut that you're supporting is not going to, or will still allow you to achieve those goals?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a question.
Hold on, council members. Let's reset the clock. Councilman Charette, you have 5 minutes.
Just a question of the 151 P1s that were just commented on. How many of those are actually assigned to patrol?
Off the top of my head, I think there's roughly about 110, 120 officers assigned to patrol.
110 or 120 out of the 151.
It's in flux. We're reconstituting some different proactive units, which is another part of a restructure in problem solving, is to have resources to look at those problems.
And just to be clear, we are eliminating 17 P1s. The 7 that were reclassified, the number that were unfilled, and the number that are filled.
In this budget, we're reducing the P1s by 10.
Plus the 7. Plus the 7 that were please, let's be honest. Those 7 positions were eliminated. They weren't promoted, they were eliminated. They would be replaced with P1s.
Councilmember Ibarra, 5 minutes.
Okay, just since we're talking about revenue, 4th of July is around the corner. We want to see what is the plan. In the past, we've had Chief Burgoan come to the council and give a plan, but we never got an actual revenue generating for the efforts that they did on 4th of July. We had a young lady right now, she spoke about her dog going out because of the illegal fireworks. They already started in my neighborhood as well. We just want to make sure that our PD will be on top of those calls, and even if it's just an apartment complex, go after those property owners and get that revenue. We never get a report of what revenue we generated with those plans.
If I could, the revenue from the 4th of July is generated from the sale of Safe and Sane fireworks. There's a surcharge on that, which generates revenue to fund proactive units out there during and before and after the 4th of July. So we are in the process of putting together a policing plan with staffing for overtime to go out there on the 4th of July and the weekend and days leading up to and after the 4th of July.
Okay, yeah, if we can be more aggressive in citing those property owners, I think we can actually have even more available for you guys.
Thank you. We want to allow our police chief. Does this conclude your presentation, or were we right in the middle of it? Do you want to just continue?
I didn't have a presentation. It was just to answer questions.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, then, we have a few remaining council members who'd like to comment. 5 minutes, Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief. So one of the things that we just did, we just got back from Vegas, and we were at the Recon Convention, and we were there to try to generate revenue to get people to come to our city. You know, we were out there, we were marketing our city. I mean, we spent 4 days out there, and I think that we talked, we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The double booked, and we worked hard to try to get people to recognize that San Bernardino is a wonderful place, and we need you to come because we need revenue in our city. So one of the things that consistently came up was the safety of the city. I always say that businesses they won't come to San Bernardino if they have to lock their doors or keep their doors locked because they're here to make money. So with this new structure, how is that going to help our businesses? When we're doing community policing, it will definitely help some of the businesses within the community. But with the elimination of the positions, let me say this first. I'm listening to a lot of people talk, and so for some of the people that have been in the workforce as long as I have, or maybe even longer, have to understand that the workforce has changed a lot, whether it be the council, the city offices, or the police department. We know that we're dealing with different categories of the millennials and everything else. The millennials are the majority of the people that are applying for these positions. And, with me being a manager, I see that I have to be a little bit more patient because they are doing things that are unheard of in the workforce, things that are that I didn't learn and things that some of you older people didn't. Younger people, I don't want to insult anybody, but things that we learned, we had work ethic. And so I think that has changed over time because time is changing. So when we talk about management, we need more managers to understand that we have to manage these people that are coming into the workforce. They didn't have programs like we had back when I was growing up. So there's a lot of big change. So I understand the management part of it. But as a council member sitting up here, I have to be concerned about the public, and I'm very concerned about revenue. And while we're out here marketing the city, we want to be able to say, hey, this is a safe city to come to. And so I'm hoping with this restructure that's something that can happen. And do you see that happening with this structure?
One of the most important things that community can do to attract business is raise the median income of the residents of the city. And the way you do that is to make the city safer, not only safer, but give the perception that it's safer as well. It's a combination of both. And then you will attract people to live in the community that have a higher median income. And what that does is every business has a business model. And if we want to attract that business, we have to match their business model. And raising the median income by attracting people to move in the community because they feel it's safer will make that happen. And so our effort is to go out there and reduce crime and the fear and perception of crime. And I think that our reorganization and our community policing efforts will accomplish that. And that's the direction we have to go because that's how we're going to attract the business by getting people to move into the community.
Thank you.
Very good. I want to say this about our police department. We do have the finest police department. We're working out the kinks. We're working out the inefficiencies. This budget, you've tasked this mayor and council to address those inefficiencies, to plug the gaps, to narrow those response times. We're doing it. We're trying our best. We have full confidence and faith in our patrol officers, making sure that they get to that next call. I want to say thank you very much to our police department. You're doing a fine job. The reorganization is effectuating from that ivory tower purge of a centralized headquarters down to effectuating 5 command area units. This allows for people to interact, interface. Business corridors can now align with the priorities of that commander, and they can now talk and dialogue, and this is going to be a great, great thing. I'm going to stand behind it. I'm bold enough to say I'm supporting this 110%. We're going to make this happen. Our city council's behind our police department, and we're going to make things happen in this city. We want to deter crime. We want to impact crime, and we're going to do it, folks. We need your support. We need your support. And the comments and murmurs that I hear, we need to be supportive of our police department. It's time. It's time that we get off our duff and we start supporting our police department in the areas where we can impact crime. Let's do it. Any other council members? Mr. Figueroa, you're recognized, sir, for 5 minutes. No, please go ahead. Okay, Mr. Charette, you're balancing your time.
Yeah, just one more
Hold on, Mr. Charette.
Yeah,
Ms. Hannah,
I got about
we'll wait for the
4
we'll wait for the
minutes.
time clock. The balance of his time. There you go.
I don't think that's right, but I don't care. I want to go on record as saying I've always, in my 10 years here, have supported the police department. It's the number one thing that we do as council members and as leaders of a community. And there is no doubt that I support both branches, the management side and the POA side, the rank and file, and I've always supported that. I can't say the same that they've supported me, but I've always supported them. And I think that that's the most important thing we could do. My point here is just to be honest with the public that I don't think we're using real good judgment and really being as effective as we can. I support the police 100%. We gave them $60 million a few years ago. I've tried to support them all the way along. I just think that we're not utilizing the best practices now. I respect you, Chief. You've got a lot of experience at this. I just don't believe, and I just think it's a shell game when we're still talking. I'm not going to stop on that 17 people. Those are 17 people that are on the streets making calls and going to calls to solve those problems. And so when we're talking about supporting and providing safety to our community, that's where they get, when you pick up the phone, you're going to get a dispatcher send a P1, a patrol officer, to that incident. And that's where we need to be with proper supervision. I agree with that.
Okay, Ms. City Manager, are we concluding the presentation portion?
Yes, unless the council has
Okay.
questions on the remaining.
So why don't we,
recommended cuts.
remaining balance on council members, there's some council members that haven't opined or commented. Are there anyone, Councilman Sanchez, Councilmember Ibarra, Councilman Figueroa? Okay, Councilman Charette, you have some balance of your time, sir?
On what?
Okay, Councilman Nickel.
Talk about what? Are we
Councilman
done
Nickel.
with the presentation?
Yes, we are, sir. Councilman
I don't have any
Nickel.
more to say about the
Okay,
PD.
then, thank you. Councilman Nickel.
If I could come back to minutes.
Councilmember Richard, our Mayor Pro Tem.
I just have one comment since you concluded your presentation. I just wanted to let it go on record that I am not in support of eliminating anything related to the library services. And I noticed that on one of the, on some of the backup documentation, I think it was one of the libraries that is actually in my ward that was on the chopping block. and I don't support that at all. I believe that every community needs a library. I know that that's where I grew up, in the library. I don't go so much now that we have all of our new technology. But I agree that every community needs to have a library, and I will not support the elimination of any library.
Very good. Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes, and I will agree with the Councilwoman Richard. No, I support all the branch libraries and want to keep them all open, and the cuts will simply have to come someplace else. And again, I think we need to relook at some of the cuts that were made in some places. And I think if you balance the library against some of the other areas, in which I think there really is still a lot of fat, I think we should keep the libraries open. Thank you.
Very good. You'll remember for our audience and viewing audience, as I began my term in December of 19, we did some very immediate deep cuts. Very proud of those cuts. We almost made $1 million in savings. We slashed the westbound communications contract for $450,000. We slashed a contractor that was reporting to the administrative C-suites of this city for $10,000 a month. We slashed it. About 2 months ago, our city council had the bold courage of addressing a public works outhouse building in the tune of $200,000. We slashed it. We said, no, it's not the right time, and we're not going to do it. And when I inherited this job and earned this job to be your mayor, I was informed from the California Department of Recycling of a $10,000 a day fine. A $10,000 a day fine. I immediately assembled my team. We were proactive on it. I engaged with our waste management hauler. I engaged with our administrators, and I assessed the situation to see how we can resolve this. After knowing about this, that's right, after it being blinded from me as a council member and from many of our council members, the stark reality is, folks, we saved a incoming missile for this community. $10,000 a day was going to be fined upon our waste management via the city of San Bernardino. We rectified the situation. We ordered attorneys up to Sacramento for the hearing. The council took bold courage to pass an emergency ordinance on waste recycling, and we did it. We did it. And now, just 2 weeks ago, or about 10 days ago, we received a letter. Let me back up a little bit. We put a plan into place. Thankful for our Burtech Waste Management Disposal Company for assisting us, providing that guidance. And the reality is that we are in full cooperation with the California State Department of Recycling. The California Department of Recycling has issued a letter of favorable issuance to the city, directed to me and to our city management team, and we're in full compliance. And you know what? That fine of $10,000 a day went bye-bye. The $10,000 a day fine would have been not paid just by general fund, but we passed that saving on to our ratepayers, and we saved an incoming missile. So when you do your tabulations, council, or audience, we have saved close to $1 million in the short 5 months that I've been your mayor. We're doing the hard, heavy lifting. These are nothing but proposals. So with that, Councilman Nickel.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll have the first meeting of our ad hoc committee, and I would like to implore our council members that are on that committee and our staff that we get to work tonight and start looking at what we really need to be focused on. Really, this is about stabilization and growth, not cuts. We can cut until we cut ourselves to the bone, which I think we're starting to do now. So I would like to ask our staff, packet page 501, we have a pie chart that shows our sources of revenue. I would like to break out the transient occupancy tax revenue. I'm not sure where that is there, but I'd like to see that separate. And then I would also like to see what the change has been over the last, we'll start with the last 3 years in terms of each of those different revenue sources. Have they declined? Have they increased? What's been the change in each one of those revenue sources?
Yeah, on the pie, yeah. So each one of those categories, and I would like to add TOT, break it out, whatever section that's in. And then also packet page 507, I think we really need to start thinking not just in terms of cuts, but in terms of consolidation. Riverside has done a very good job in terms of their development services, combining public works, community development, water, fire, building and safety. I think we need to start thinking in terms of how we begin consolidating, improving the delivery of services by consolidating services, identifying waste. And I will put this challenge to our department heads. Let's look at how we can consolidate, provide more efficient services. This just isn't about cutting every year. How can we cut service? No, let's make it more efficient. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Fortunately, the $10,000 a day fine went bye-bye. Ratepayers are in our city is in full compliance, and so we're excited about that with more information to be released soon. But these are exciting times. We are paring down and we're streamlining our organization. We are creating those efficiencies where it is tough to tell the public about. And so at this time, Councilmember Barr.
Yes, so earlier I was asking about the positions, if we were going to let anybody go that were currently servicing our city. If we all look at page of the packet, page 536, it does say there specifically, up to 26 full-time employees will be impacted. Up to 18 employees will potentially be laid off after the bumping process. This is my concern. I need to we need to see that the employees that we're impacting are not the ones that are also servicing our city. Whether it be people just filling up the potholes, the building inspectors, our code enforcement officers. You know, that just to give you, I don't want to see any of our employees be cut right now. Unfortunately, because they're helping our city and we need as much help as possible. I doubt department heads are going to be out there filling out the potholes for us.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. If there are no more comments, we will at this time adjourn into our closed session and we will return. Thank you. We will reconvene our meeting. We've returned from the closed session matter. At this time, I will ask the city attorney to report out from closed session.
Mayor, council members, and members of the public, the city council has voted 6-2 to terminate the city manager without cause pursuant to her agreement. It was a vote of 6-2 with the council members Charette and Mulvihill voting no.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. City Attorney. At this time, we will adjourn our meeting, and we thank you and drive home safely.